For thousands of years, whispers of an ancient people have echoed through scripture, history, and myth. A people so numerous, so unstoppable, that their release would shake the very foundations of the world. Who are Gog and Magog? Are they a lost tribe of humanity, or something far more dangerous? From the pages of holy books, to the chronicles of ancient empires, to the most chilling legends passed down through generations, their story appears again and again. But where did they come from? Who built the colossal barrier that holds them back? And what will happen when it finally falls? In this documentary, we will explore the beliefs of major religions, uncover historical accounts, and dive deep into the myths that have kept this mystery alive for centuries. This is the untold story of Gog and Magog. In Christian tradition, Gog and Magog appear as mysterious and powerful nations, often symbolizing chaos and opposition to God's plan. They are mentioned in the book of Ezekiel, where they are portrayed as vast armies from the ends of the earth, destined to march against the people of God in the final days. In the book of Revelation, they take on an even more apocalyptic role, representing the ultimate forces of evil that will gather for the final battle after 1,000 years of peace. To many Christians, Gog and Magog are not just historical tribes, but symbols of the spiritual conflict between good and evil that will culminate in the end times. Judaism's perspective on Gog and Magog. In Jewish tradition, the story of Gog and Magog is rooted in the Hebrew Bible, particularly in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. Here, Gog is portrayed as the leader of a mighty nation, or perhaps a coalition of nations, who will rise in the latter days to wage war against Israel. Magog is often described as the land or realm from which Gog comes, a distant and mysterious place in the far north. The prophecy paints a picture of a final, cataclysmic battle. Gog and his armies will come like a storm, covering the land, intent on destroying the people of God. But according to Ezekiel, this invasion will end in divine intervention. Earthquakes, hail, fire, and brimstone will fall from the heavens, annihilating the invaders. This is not just a military conflict. It is framed as a cosmic showdown, where God himself acts to defend his people and reveal his power to the nations. In later Jewish writings, such as the Talmud and Midrash, Gog and Magog became symbols of the ultimate enemies of the Jewish people, forces of chaos and destruction that will be unleashed before the arrival of the Messiah. In some interpretations, their defeat is seen as the final step before the messianic era of peace and righteousness begins. Comparison with Christianity. While Christianity inherits the concept of Gog and Magog from the Hebrew Scriptures, the New Testament, especially in the book of Revelation, reinterprets it in a different context. In Revelation 20, Gog and Magog are mentioned as nations from the four corners of the earth, deceived by Satan after the 1,000 years of peace, who will rise to wage one last war against the saints. Unlike Ezekiel's version, where Gog and Magog are a specific enemy from the north, in Revelation they represent the universal rebellion of evil forces against God at the end of history. Similarities. In both traditions, Gog and Magog are agents of massive destruction, symbolizing the final opposition to God's people. Both portray their defeat as an act of divine power, not merely human military strength. Differences. In Judaism, Ezekiel, the battle happens before the Messianic age and focuses on a specific invasion of Israel. In Christianity, Revelation, it happens after a millennium of peace and is more symbolic of the ultimate rebellion against God, involving the whole world. In essence, Judaism frames Gog and Magog as the last earthly threat before redemption, while Christianity sees them as the closing act in the cosmic drama of good versus evil. In Islamic tradition, the story of Gog and Magog, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, is both dramatic and highly specific. Unlike in some Christian and Jewish interpretations where their existence can be symbolic, in Islam they are described as real tribes of human beings, descendants of Adam, vast in number, fierce in nature, and destined to play a decisive role in the final days of the world. The Quran references them explicitly in 2 chapters, Surah Al-Kahf, 1894-99, and Surah Al-Anbiya, 2196-97. In Surah Al-Kahf, their story is tied to the legendary figure Dhul Qarnayn, a just and powerful ruler who traveled to the farthest reaches of the earth. There, he encountered a people plagued by the corruption and violence of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. They begged him for protection. Dhul Qarnayn responded not with gold, but with engineering, constructing a massive barrier of iron and molten copper between 2 mountains, effectively sealing them off from the rest of the world. In Surah Al-Anbiya, the focus shifts to the end times. The verse declares that when the barrier is finally broken, they will surge forth from every high place, overwhelming the earth with their sheer numbers. This moment is described as one of the major signs of the Day of Judgment, following events like the appearance of the false Messiah, Al-Masih, Ad-Dajjal, and preceding the final destruction of the world. The Hadith literature, the recorded sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, adds vivid details. In Sahih Muslim, the Prophet describes Ya'juj and Ma'juj as so numerous that for every human being alive, there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of them. They drink entire rivers dry, devour crops, and leave nothing but ruin in their path. In one narration, when they are finally released, they will swarm across the earth like waves, killing indiscriminately. Their advance will be unstoppable until they reach a point where they arrogantly declare they have conquered the heavens. Yet, their end comes not through human armies, but through divine intervention. In another authentic narration, after the return of Prophet Jesus, Isa ibn Maryam, and the defeat of the Dajjal, Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be released. Jesus and the believers will retreat to the safety of Mount Sinai or other high ground, unable to fight them. It is then that Allah will send a mysterious worm-like disease into the necks of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, killing them all in a single night. Their bodies will fill the earth, and a terrible stench will spread, until Allah sends birds with necks like camels to carry them away, cleansing the land. Physically, Islamic narrations describe them in varying ways. Some hadith suggest they are short and broad-shouldered, with small eyes and flat faces, resembling certain nomadic peoples. Others emphasize their ferocity, lack of morality, and relentless hunger for destruction over any particular physical form. What is consistent across narrations is their overwhelming population, so large that their mere release signals the collapse of human civilization as we know it. In Judaism, Gog and Magog often represent enemy nations gathered against Israel in the final battle, as seen in Ezekiel 38 to 39. The Jewish vision frames the conflict as a national and geopolitical struggle, ending with divine deliverance for Israel. In Christianity, particularly in Revelation 20, Gog and Magog are symbolic of the forces of evil gathered for a last rebellion against God after a period of peace. This rebellion is crushed by divine fire, ushering in the final judgment. Islam shares with both faiths the idea that Gog and Magog represent overwhelming evil and that their destruction comes by God's will, not human power. However, Islam differs in its emphasis on their tangible, physical existence, their current imprisonment behind a real barrier, and their direct role as a chronological marker of the end times. In Islamic eschatology, their release is not just symbolic, it is an actual, catastrophic global event witnessed by all humanity. Closing statement for this segment. Across all three Abrahamic faiths, Gog and Magog stand as harbingers of chaos, finality, and divine judgment. Yet the Islamic account offers perhaps the most vivid, grounded, and sequential narrative, placing them in a timeline of end-time events tied to identifiable figures like Dhul-Qarnayn and Jesus, and framed not only as an allegory, but as a prophecy of a real, world-shattering invasion still to come. But what about outside the Abrahamic faiths? While Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all have their own narratives about Gog and Magog, whispers of similar figures can be found scattered across other belief systems and ancient mythologies. In certain Eastern traditions, some historians draw parallels between Gog and Magog and the ferocious nomadic tribes of Central Asia, groups like the Mongols or the Huns, whose sudden invasions brought devastation to vast empires. Though these parallels are often speculative, they highlight how cultures across the globe seem to share a fear of unstoppable forces arriving from distant, mysterious lands. In Chinese chronicles, there are records of the wild people beyond the Great Wall, dangerous hordes who lived in lands of perpetual wind and dust, echoing the imagery often used to describe Gog and Magog in religious texts. Even in European folklore, medieval maps sometimes marked distant, unexplored territories, with inscriptions like, "Here dwell the peoples of Gog and Magog," warning travelers of monstrous nations lying beyond the known world. The historical lens. From a historical perspective, Gog and Magog have been linked, rightly or wrongly, to real-world peoples who once posed existential threats to civilizations. The Scythians, the Khazars, the Huns, and later the Mongols have all, at various times, been branded as the embodiment of Gog and Magog. To those living in fear of invasion, these names became symbols, shorthand for chaos, ruin, and divine punishment. The realm of legend, myth, and folklore have taken the story even further. In some traditions, Gog and Magog are described not as humans at all, but as giants, towering savage beings capable of crushing armies. Others depict them as monstrous hybrids with grotesque features, sharp claws, and an insatiable hunger for destruction. In Arthurian legend, for example, they appear as ancient enemies of Britain, chained by a legendary king after being defeated. In Islamic folklore outside the core religious texts, they sometimes become almost supernatural, a swarm-like force that no wall, no matter how high or thick, can contain forever. Why they endure. Across all these cultures, one theme remains constant. Gog and Magog represent the unknown terror beyond the horizon. Whether they are seen as humans, giants, or monsters, their legend has been shaped and reshaped by fear, faith, and imagination. Now, having explored their place in various religions, history, and legend, it's time to uncover what the ancient world truly believed these figures were, and how their myth has traveled across centuries. Legends do not remain frozen in time. They evolve, adapt, and transform with each generation that tells them. From the ancient world to the medieval era, the image of Gog and Magog shifted constantly. In the early centuries, they were seen purely as instruments of divine judgment, unleashed only by the will of God. But as empires rose and fell, their identity began to mirror the fears of each age. During the Roman Empire, Christian writers often equated them with barbarian tribes pressing against the empire's borders. In Islamic civilization, they were tied to the mysterious peoples said to be trapped behind a colossal barrier, a wall built by the just ruler Dhul-Qarnayn, a figure many associated with Alexander the Great or Cyrus of Persia. By the Middle Ages, Gog and Magog were no longer distant strangers. They were woven into maps, sermons, and political propaganda. European rulers sometimes used their legend to justify wars, claiming that their enemies were descendants of Gog and Magog, destined for destruction. In Asian chronicles, particularly in the Mongol era, the legend was reinterpreted to fit the narrative of unstoppable Eastern armies. To some, the Mongols themselves were Gog and Magog, a living fulfillment of prophecy. To others, they were a warning that the barrier, wherever it stood, had been breached. Even in the age of exploration, when sailors crossed into unknown seas, cartographers would place the lands of Gog and Magog in remote corners of the world, reminders that the Earth still held uncharted dangers. Closing transition. The names change, the faces change, but the role remains the same: to embody humanity's deepest fear of the outsider, the invader, the force beyond control. But what if the story of Gog and Magog is not just history, not just myth, but a prophecy still waiting to unfold? As we come to the end of this journey through the mysteries of Gog and Magog, we leave you with some questions to ponder. Who are they really? Are they simply myths woven by ancient fears, or do they represent real forces that will one day return? Could the stories told across religions and cultures be pieces of a larger, hidden truth? Thank you so much for watching, especially if you've stayed until this part. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this documentary, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's reach 500 subscribers together so I can bring you even more fascinating stories and documentaries. I promise to keep improving and delivering better content with every video. There are many exciting tales waiting to be told. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and take care. See you soon.